I saw the film and I
My
thought
pleasure.
that it was a very, very important film, and we must talk a little bit more about it. So, this is, of course, the first interview that we're doing for a new series that we're starting with filmmakers, especially, news documentaries called Doc Talks. So,
Mhm.
so first of all, like I wanted to just get started with you about the film's journey. How did it come about? How did you come across this subject? And how did Pulitzer get
Mhm.
involved in the project?
So I think I came across, I'll go like really far, far, far back in 2023 or 24, actually. No, sorry, 23. December, around October, November, December, I was just researching something on Aman Ki Asha, the peace initiative between India and Pakistan. And during that, somewhere in that research, I saw a very short, raw documentary about this whole issue of fishermen arrest. And I was immediately intrigued. I was like, what is this about fishermen? Because even though I am a journalist, I had no idea about, something so big was happening on one of our borders. So I started digging into it a little bit more, and I found that this issue has been heavily covered in India. It has been heavily covered in Pakistan. But it's always, when you read it, like an Indian would be reading about the Indian side, and a Pakistan report would be read by someone in Pakistan. But I wanted to get, you know, the issue on a common platform, like so that we as a nation in India and they as a nation in Pakistan know that it's a cross-border issue and it's not only pervasive in Pakistan or not only pervasive in India. That was the idea behind it when I reached out to Pulitzer with the proposal. And they were immediately on board. They really liked the idea. And I collaborated with a colleague in Pakistan, Jemima Freedy, and we both. So she reported from Pakistan, Sindh, and I reported from Gujarat and Diu in India, and we both together brought voices from families on the platform, and we did a cross-border story that was published by Nikkei Asia Review. But during the course of this reporting, I realized that the one of the biggest casualties, as I would say, was the women, because they were the one who were affected the most because of it. Because they're male family members, and fishing industry in itself is a very male dominated industry. So when your fishermen are arrested, when your male family members are arrested, you do not have any other means of livelihood, and suddenly your family is completely disbalanced. You don't have income coming in. There is a very small uh, compensation that the Gujarat government pays. Even Maharashtra government doesn't even pay that. So if you're a fisherman from Maharashtra who's been arrested, you don't even get that minimal support that the Gujarat government gives to its people. So that's when I realized that, okay, this issue is affecting women way more disproportionately, and I sort of decided to sort of change the lens a little bit. And I had recently finished documentary filmmaking in Berlin, and I wanted to give this a shot. Like, I wanted to try this on, and I reached out to Pulitzer again, and they were very happy to get behind the project. So I'm very grateful to them for trusting it.
Right, and I think what you're saying is so important because, oftentimes, and especially what we've seen in the last few days, is that people get so carried away with,
Hmm.
like with conflict and what it means on a geopolitical level, that often
Right.
we completely ignore the human cost that is attached to it. And it's these
Absolutely.
women. So this gaze I thought was very important, that we're looking at the surviving women who, at least in my opinion, I would say that even in terms of, like when it comes to issues like farmer suicides, the
Hmm.
burden of, like the taking care of the family comes onto these women, and they're not equipped to handle that. They haven't been brought up to be in that position.
Right.
So what, just tell me a little bit about that gaze and what it means to look at the human cost of conflict.
So I think my DOP and I were very categorical in not showing, trauma porn as the phrase goes, but we wanted to show and highlight the struggles, like a backbreaking job that they're doing. They're working, they're sitting. For example, one of my protagonists, Manju Ben, she was sitting in the sun from morning, probably at 7 in the morning till 11. Then she brings her kids back, and then she goes, her kids come back from school, then she goes back to the market, and then she's there until evening. All of that for maybe 100 or 200 rupees for a day. Sometimes not even that. Like she told me on a bad day, she could not make even more than $50, even though she's sitting in the sun for, I don't know, 8 hours, 9 hours. So that's the kind of stuff I wanted to show that. And how do you pay attention to the family? How do you pay attention to the children who are now without an adult supervising you and your studies or your basic upbringing? So this is not just about, financial struggles. It's like every aspect of your life gets inadvertently affected as a result of it. And the other protagonist was also Ravi Bhai's mother, who lost her husband to the shock of her son's arrest. So these are stories that go far beyond financial turmoil. It's not just about the money, but your life has been upended for God knows for how long. And now that the situation is even worse between India and Pakistan bilaterally, what does that mean for people who are sitting, who are arrested in Pakistan now? What happens? Because they have always, the release has always coincided with some peace offering between the two nations. Now, if now at a time when they are very much quite literally at war with each other, how does that play out, in terms of such bilateral agreements and such in terms of such acts of humanity, as we say? So these women are like, they are perpetually in that state of waiting. They don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that point in the film where the mother talks about the loss of the father, I thought was the most poignant point in the film, because she says that he just kept waiting for him. Even in the last days, he kept asking for his son.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, this often gets seen as a very political thing, because all we understand, like you said, is, this whole thing comes up only when we talk about peace efforts. But, we just don't talk about this when they are already in jail. So continuing with that thought, I just wanted to understand now, what is the current status legally of this whole thing? How are we looking at this? Um, of course, there are these facts that come in the film, how many Indians are still in Pakistani jails. But just as a procedure, where do we stand with the legality of this whole thing?
So technically, from what I understand, from what the activists have told me, that once the identities of these fishermen have been established, they are supposed to be released within 3 months. I suppose, I think it's 3 months. As soon as their identities have been established, they are supposed to be released in 3 months. But the problem is that the bureaucracy creates hurdles in that step. Like they will not allow embassy officials to visit them, or they would, so these steps which are required for that identity verification process are either disrupted in some way bureaucratically, or like for example, last year I remember, was it no last to last year in 2023, 23 or 24, I'm sorry, please, I'm mixing up the dates right now. But there was a time in July, because India and Pakistan both share a list of prisoners on the 1st of January and the 1st of July. So in July, they were supposed to release, I think, about 90 Indian prisoners, Pakistan. And suddenly, all the arrangements were made. Like they were supposed to be, there were people welcome, ready to welcome them in India. The activists were there, ready to welcome them in India. But then suddenly, out of nowhere, 2 days before they released the Pakistan just said we are not releasing them anymore, and without giving any reason why. 100 prisoners were the ones who were supposed to be released are not being released, and now because your diplomatic channel is broken in that sense, you don't even know. So it's this whole conjecture and this whole ambiguity and lack of information that makes this issue so much more complex. It's not just as simple as, oh, so you were allegedly illegally fishing on the border, and so we are arresting you. It goes far beyond that. It's this whole diplomatic, the rupture in our diplomatic relations with the neighboring country, which makes this process all the more complicated.
And you mentioned in the film that the committee has not even met for so many years.
Yes. Yes. So the thing is that from what the activists told me was that I think the last time they met was in 2013. After that, the committee never met. The committee was formed in 2008 and the last met in 2013. Then there was another, they initiated the process again in 2018 when India and Pakistan activists said that we need to nominate the judges. These judges basically would go, Indian judges would go to Pakistan and Pakistani judges would come to India, and then they will speak to these respective prisoners to kind of, accelerate the process. They would bring factual information from these prisons to their respective governments or to the attention of their governments, and things would, the wheels of diplomacy would churn accordingly. But in 2013, for some reason, the two side didn't meet. And then in 2018, there was this call for let's revive the committee, and India appointed four of its judges, the four as is mandated by the committee. But Pakistan did not do it for some reason, and the committee never met. So it's been kind of defunct ever since.
So what I'm understanding is that, when a country like India decides to escalate things instead of
Hmm.
going through diplomatic channels and escalating things to an extent that then, any kind of talks kind of become very difficult. Like for example, now for us to get back on the table and talk, that kind of reactions to conflict essentially does not take into account issues like these. That if you kind of stop a dialogue with the other country, that means that the dialogue
Hmm.
about these prisoners also is collateral damage.
Correct. Because when you're not talking about, like so many bilateral treaties during this period kind of, suffered a poor fate. Like, for example, the Indus Water Treaty, then the Simla Agreement, for example. So these were the two very, important treaties that were kind of they were the cornerstone of a peaceful kind of coexistence between the two countries, as in for conflict resolution, for any kind of disagreements, they would have to go through a channel of dialogue. But with these two very important treaties now standing, hanging in the balance, what happens with things that are sort of, how do I explain? I mean, what happens to things that was more done as a humanitarian gesture, that's something as a written word, because there was no law around it. Like there was nothing like, okay, we are going to release prisoners in 3 months. No, it was more of an understanding, the law as applicable to Pakistan, law as applicable to India. But there was no agreement per se that we are going to do such and such thing. But if there is no written word, what happens? Like these things are just kind of hanging in the balance at this point.
um and like just from my understanding, the activist in the film does mention that they inadvertently, which was also the official line, he says, which is true, because every news that we read about, it says that inadvertently they went to the other side. What is How exactly does this happen? Like, isn't there a clear demarcation of the border? How do they not realize that they have gone to the other side?
So, the IMBL, the International Maritime Boundary Line, basically is disputed in the sense because the dispute basically goes all the way back to Sir Creek. So, Sir Creek in itself is disputed. So, the line basically, depending on which side of the Sir Creek, I mean, which side's narrative you're believing, the line, the IMBL would flow in that, with that in mind. For example, if you're taking India's version, then the line is, at least this further into Pakistan. But if you believe Pakistan's version, then it's this further into India. So what the governments did was to avoid any kind of confusion. They defined the IMBL and they defined 25 nautical miles on both sides of that line as a no fishing zone to avoid any kind of confusion. But if a fisherman is even in that 25 nautical mile no fishing zone, an Indian boat will capture that fisherman, and a Pakistani boat will capture an Indian fisherman, even if they are in that no fishing zone, because it's kind of disputed, so to speak. So this is where and this is where the problem basically originates. But the alleged illegal fishing is that in India, and this is more pervasive in India than it is in Pakistan, because in India, there are far more fishermen. The fishing happens way more in the Gujarat coastal belt, and as a result, what happens is, and then of course there is industrialization, and there is the pollution, the global warming. So what happens is the fish that was initially available at closer to our borders is now deeper and deeper into the sea. So they have to go in deeper into the ocean to get a better catch. And if they get good catch in one fishing season, then they don't get hired the next year, as captains, which is like the only source of income for them. So they are basically, they push their lucks a lot. So they go like maybe a little more deeper, a little more deeper, a little. And sometimes what happens is the currents are such, sometimes it's windy, sometimes, whatever the technical reasons are, they just somehow end up, crossing that border. So, and that's where it just, everything goes to hell from that point.
Yeah. That's going to be my next question. That the film, interestingly, also touches upon the climate crisis, where it, puts into
Right,
perspective the fact that the fishermen are in direct, you know, uh, this thing, they directly get affected by not only, the environmental cost of industrialization and climate change, but also, at risk for economical and political disadvantage. So that I think is
right,
also a point which cannot be, like this cannot be seen in isolation, and we need to understand that point also. And this is not just, I think, a problem limited to Gujarat, but also other coastal states where the fishing communities are
right.
constantly being displaced. So was there any specific, dislocation that you witnessed while you were doing this story?
I did not, because this was not something do you mean displacement as a result of
Yeah,
fish?
displacement or
So no,
any other issues specific to, the climate change crisis.
climate change essentially has only been, like, this is the only major thing that has happened because of climate change. The temperature has kind of essentially warmed up a little bit for the fish to survive closer to the shore. So that's essentially the one thing that has been the biggest problem, at least for the Indian side, again, because there are far more fishermen here. Then there is far more fishing activity that happens on our side of the border, not so much on the Pakistani side. So, of course, their numbers are also far fewer than us. Um, Moreover, the rapid industrialization, at least along the Gujarat coastal belt, has also been one of the reasons why, there is the toxic waste in sea, for example, which has, of course, affected the fish population. So these are some of the reasons that have forced these communities to go beyond the safer periphery for them to fish, and deeper and deeper and deeper into the Arabian Sea, which has, of course, then the cascading effect of them crossing the border and then getting arrested, and then spending inordinate amount of time in Pakistani prisons.
So going forward, Kanika, like, now how do you see this shaping up in terms of, like you mentioned that, um, the only way out of this whole thing is diplomacy, is the two countries coming together, maybe reviving the method that they were using. But what is the right way ahead, according to you, which, doesn't criminalize what these fishermen are trying to do, and for us to humanly understand that, what they are being forced to, like you said, go further and further. What would be the correct thing to do now going forward?
I think during the course of my investigation on this story, I also found that a lot of the systems are already in place. For example, like fishermen in India are given good quality GPS. There is, of course, a support system, like they have, I think, some kind of connection also. Sorry, I'm forgetting the sea language, as they say, but there is a good amount of system in their boats that now prevents them
Okay.
from crossing the
Hmm.
border. But despite of that, and there's, of course, the fisheries department that gives them updates on the what's the climate like, so that they don't get swept away by the wind. So there are such things in place, but the problem is that the arrests happen nevertheless. The problem is that when the diplomacy is broken between two countries, these people kind of get in the middle of it, like they get affected because of that. And now with things really going all out, I mean, I really don't know what's going to happen with these people. I mean, I have gotten some distress calls where they are worried. They are asking me that if there is somehow I can ask about, the well-being of their family members, and I feel helpless because I don't know. Like there is no way I can there's nothing I can do to find, the well-being, because they are not even allowed to talk to each other. I don't know if you've noticed, if you heard it in the film, there is a communication embargo. You're not even allowed to talk to each other. The letters may or may not reach your family members, or their letters may or may not reach you. So there's a complete, it's like they are living in a black hole. You don't know about anything about them. So if this doesn't instigate the countries to look at an issue with purely humanitarian perspective, I don't know what can be done, because this, unless, because if we were to go through proper channels, and unless there is a the resolution of Sir Creek dispute, unless there is a clear defined demarcated IMBL, this issue will continue to persist, and that is something which I don't know, we don't foresee in the in immediate future. So what can happen is that incidents such as these can be maybe resolved at sea itself. Like, you don't need to arrest these people. Like, if there is someone who has crossed into the no fishing zone, or inadvertently into your boundaries, you can just release them, take their catch, drop the catch in the ocean. If you're worried that why are you fishing in my water, just drop their catch and send them back. These are some things you can pretty much resolve the issue on the sea, in the sea itself. Why but when you basically take them all the way to your country, you know that these people can be used in the future to, for some political benefit. I don't know, and this is where I think the problem starts.
Yeah, actually, that's probably one area which we don't tend to think about. That they could
Exactly.
actually be political pawns in this whole conflict between the two countries. And I'm assuming that going forward, this communication is going to get further fractured because it
Absolutely.
doesn't seem like the diplomacy is coming back on the track anytime soon.
True. And which is precisely why I feel this film is so much more important, because it humanizes this very important and a very pervasive issue. And this is not something that's happening in a vacuum. It's not something that's happening in isolation. We are talking hundreds of prisoners. We are not talking 5, 10, 15. Not that they are not important, but we are talking hundreds of prisoners who are currently languishing in Pakistan. And now, God knows what's going to happen with them. God knows how and when they are going to come back home. And I'm sure the activists on both sides, as they have been working very actively, even in Pakistan, to their merit, they have been working for release of Indian prisoners, and Indian activists, of course, have been working for the release of Pakistani prisoners. It's a it's a coordinated effort, which actually I found to be even more fascinating. That in a world where we are fighting, there are two two organizations or people, or believers, who thought that no, we need to work on this together. It's a cross border, it's a shared issue, and we need to come to a solution together. And there have been people who have worked very actively on this cause. So I feel as though things are derailed at the moment, but I really, really, really pray for the sake of these women that it comes back on track, at least in cases of these people, at least. Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'll come back to the women in the film who, of course, are the heroes of the story. But just as an aside, I wanted to know if you have an impact campaign for the film, if you were planning to, take it to anybody in the government and maybe start a dialogue around this, is if there's any impact campaign in place.
Not yet, which, to be honest, I'm quite ashamed, because I haven't had the chance. But thankfully, this film has been nominated for awards in London for One World Media Award. It's been shortlisted, and I'm hoping to use that as a springboard to kind of, talk to departments that see this film is being now seen at the global stage. Perhaps we can arrange for universities to. I am, in fact, thinking of taking this to colleges and universities where they can learn about the issue. And I remember there was this, I was looking at some marine universities in parts of India, where I thought that this film would actually add a more human angle to the laws that they are learning. And I had thought of that, but I'm also a journalist. I'm donning a lot of hats. So it's taken a bit of backseat, but I'm glad that that we're talking about it, and I have to do everything to bring it back up to the forefront.
No, 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 that's completely understandable. No, the reason why I asked you was because if there's anything that we could do where we could step in, if we could, I'd be more than happy to actually talk to some universities if there can be screenings and talks around this. Because I think
I would love that.
it's very difficult to actually sit down and explain something to people on social media. And I think,
Hmm.
because they're
Absolutely. I mean, I would rather engage people who would be policymakers tomorrow, like who would have some say in how we engage with other countries vis-a-vis our own citizens. These are the people I want to target. These are the people I want that they should see this film and see how their policies in made in their offices are playing out on the ground. Like when you suddenly decide that I am going to, for example, if there is a policy rollout, very basic policy rollout, you don't know how it's playing out on the ground. You don't know how it's affecting people. Like, for example, when Trump announced his tariffs, fine, he's an American president. He announced his tariffs, and all hell broke loose. But then you talk to people on the ground, as I have been, in some cases, some villages that I have been speaking to, those people have been so badly affected because they've lost their jobs. Even when the tariff is on pause right now, it hasn't been implemented. It's still on pause. He rolled it out, he put it on pause, but people have already lost their jobs. So when you talk about policies it's at such a big platform, you don't know the cascading effect it has on people. And that's the point of this film, that if I show it to government, and of course I definitely want to take you up on that offer, that please do help me promote this film as much as possible, because I would love to have screenings. I would love to talk to policymakers of tomorrow, that see, when you make a policy decision, this is how it looks for people, like, so you are able to, I don't know, have a more humanitarian approach in the future. So we can only hope.
definitely, definitely, because it's also a multi-pronged attack you actually talk about these communities, because like I said, they're in direct line of the problem. They're the
Hmm.
first people to be hurt whenever if there's an attack. It's almost like the people living on the borders. It's very
Absolutely.
easy for us to sit
Absolutely.
here and glorify war and talk about the machinery of it all. But it's very difficult to actually be a family who's living on the border or living on, like the coastal lines and be in the eye of the storm. So I think it's really important. So I think moving on to, of course, like I said, the heroes of the story, these women. I would love to know from you, what was your experience of going and, looking at their stories? They seem to be very resilient, very strong, um, women who have very silently taken up this burden. Um, they are seeing, and it's also very evocative to see, to learn about how the kid's life is getting, um, like uprooted in this whole thing, because they're obviously missing a father, and then they're also missing their mother, because they're constantly being forced to go out there and work, like 12 hours a day. So tell
Right.
me a little bit about that experience of women and families.
So when I decided to make a documentary on this, I remember that I had met these. I had spent a good week with them when I was reporting for my stories that eventually got published in three publications. One was for Nikkei Asia, another one was for South China Morning Post, and another one more very deep uh, piece that I did for Himal South Asian as well. So I spent a good amount of time with these women. They were very forthcoming in sharing their stories. When they heard that a journalist is coming to listen to their sides of the stories as well, they flocked to meet me. They spoke with their hearts out. They were very, very clear in their in what they wanted to say to me, because they have been suffering, they have been living this life. That was when I was reporting. But then the documentary happened, and I was like, okay, these were the women I met in villages, and I don't know how to reach them. So that was a different challenge altogether, because the people that I was using on the ground were working with me voluntarily. It's not like they were some fixers that I had hired, or these are activists who were working for their cause, and some of them, someone connected me with someone, connected me with someone. So that's how it I found connections on the ground. And now I'm wondering, like, how do I reach these women? How do I talk to them? And how do I tell them beforehand that I'm planning to come? Because it's going to be like a documentary shoot, which means it's not something that will end in 20 minutes. It's something that's going to go on for a longer period of time. Luckily, I arrived in their midst, and they showed the same kind of enthusiasm. Manju Bain was in fact at a wedding when I arrived at her village, and she dropped the wedding. She came quickly back to the village, and she was available to me for the whole day. And I was just, um, I was speechless. I'm like, Thank you so much for coming." Like, because it was I mean, there was no way for me for me to inform them ahead of my schedule, because everything was happening, like real time. I got the approval. I got, I had to plan the logistics in immediately, because the fishing season was to close. Then everything was happening very quickly, and I didn't have the time to inform them ahead of my plans. But they made themselves available even at the drop of a hat, and which I think speaks way more about how much they wanted to tell their own story. It's not me forcing it out of them. The moment I landed there with the desire and I explained that this is what I'm trying to do with you, I want you to tell your story yourself. I want you to show me everything that you can. And they were happy to do it. They just completely slid right into the process. And I think it was very smooth. I did not have to struggle at all. The camera was a bit unnerving for them in the beginning, but then once you start talking about something very passionately, they forgot about the existence of the camera, and I think it just became very real very quickly. So thank God for that.
And what did you make of this life that they have right now? They're managing the house, managing the kids. How was that like?
So it's obviously it's a very painful thing to watch. So when I was selecting my protagonist, I wanted to show three different, women, three different profiles basically. One was a mother, taking care of the children. One was an aging mother whose son had returned just recently. Then one was a girl herself. She was what, 19, 20 or something, Nidhi. Nidhi had to give up her education. Nidhi had to make a lot of sacrifices because she had an ailing mother and an ailing father at home. Nidhi had to give up on a lot of her dreams just so she could take up the responsibility, the burden of the house, because the brother is arrested, and the sole family, bread earner is now languishing in Pakistan. She goes and works in the sun. She goes whatever ad hoc work she can find, she does for 200 rupees, 300 rupees, maximum per day. Like some days she's washing clothes, some days she's working in a field, some days she's cooking in someone's house. So it's very it's not something that you can build a life upon. It's like it's very erratic. Then speaking of the mother is, she's like, we don't have any income. We borrowed all the money we had when my son was in prison. Now I don't have any financial capability to. And one, there is even he's very scared to go back into the big sea, so he's working in very close to the shores now, so he's not able to make as much money as he used to. So that's also the financial burden on the family, plus the debt. Plus, now they don't even get the compensation that they were getting initially, because as long as her son was in prison, they were getting about 9,000 rupees a month. And the money that they borrowed from family members and stuff. So that's another aspect of it. Then, of course, Manju Ben, who has like six kids, five or six kids, and she is the sole family member who is earning, and the one who's taking care of the children, the one who's keeping her household together. And even the one line that I found very profound in the film was, she said that they say it takes about 5 years for them to release, that I have already spent 3 years, maybe I'll spend two more. And after that, I'll just give up, I'll give in to the fate, whatever it is in store for them. So they have, यार वो भी क्या करेंगे, वो कितना जितना वो कर सकते हैं वो वेट कर सकते हैं, उनकी कैपेसिटी डिप्लोमैट्स के से लड़ने की नहीं है. They don't have that ability. That's something our governments have to do. But these people are, they just silently wait. What else can they just go to? They knock every door they can. They talk to activists. They talk to people like me, journalists, who can take their word out there and tell
And
that
the
what they are.
local MLAs don't help them. The ones political representatives, they don't help
They
them.
do. They do. I mean, they're doing what they can. Like I don't know of the MLAs, but I know the activist who works very his name, shoot, I'm forgetting his name, but he is also a part of, he also works as a member of the BJP government, and he's also an activist. So he's also kind of like the liaison between these people and the government, that he kind of takes his word to them. But these things, how things, diplomacy, how bureaucracy works, it's not something that, oh, these women are suffering. Like, for example, they said that our foreign minister, Mr. Jaishankar, also visited these people, so they are aware these things do happen. Politicians do visit, leaders do visit, but the diplomacy will happen when it will happen. These things are too slow. So, and meanwhile, the life's just going by.
And just we have very um, less time now to end this meeting, but I'm going to quickly just ask you because you also met a couple of people who did come back, especially the
Mm-hmm.
one that features in the film. If you could just tell me quickly about what is now, like the mental condition, the emotional condition of the people who actually spent 5 years or more years in the prison and now come back and trying to rebuild their life.
So I'm going to speak of Ravi Bhai, who is also featured in the film. He came back. So in 24, when I was in 23, when I was reporting on his story, he had just arrived in October of 2023, and I was there in December of 2023. So he had just arrived, and I asked him how he's feeling being home. It was a bittersweet kind of feeling because he had lost two family members. He had lost his father, he had lost his sister-in-law to the shock of him being arrested. Then he's like, okay, I'm home, but where is my father? Where is my, where are my family? Where is my brother? Like, where are all these people? It's been 5 years since I left, and now he is so scared to go into the sea, to go into the bigger sea, that he is making do with whatever little employment opportunities he has, and which is not enough. It's a crippling financial burden on him, because, like I said, he has a lot of debt. His family has a lot of debt to pay back. Now, now his father also is no more, so it's a lot to take in. So they just basically, live as the day comes, like living every day as it comes. And of course, they are like, no matter what happens, even if I die hungry, I'm never going back into the sea. So that's how much traumatized they are from that experience. And then spending 5 years in a prison, in not the most conducive conditions, obviously, is something that you wouldn't want to experience again. So he was absolutely devastated, and said that I would never advise anyone to work in the sea, because, yeah, that's the last thing I remember he said to me.
That's very understandable. His trauma, I think, is very, very understandable. Um, and there are, of course, so many other questions that I want to ask you, Kanika, but maybe we can actually do a physical screening maybe somewhere, and maybe I can bring a lot more of those questions there. But yeah, I really enjoyed the film. I think it's a very, very important film. It's been shot really well also, and maybe next time we meet, we can probably talk a little bit about that. But thanks for giving me your time and
My
speaking to us
pleasure.
today. And I hope
Thank you so
to,
much.
see this film more in more and more spaces.
Thank you so much, Aditi. I really appreciate that you gave it a platform, that you think that it's an important film to be shown, and of an important film that can spark an important dialogue even. So I feel really grateful. I'm very happy to have it physically screened wherever, and you have my support 100%. And if you can help me in any way to take this film out, I will cooperate in whichever, however way possible.
ठीक है, we'll try.